She is the embodiment of the perfect Japanese woman, a feminine, restrained posture, flawless manners, and dedication to serving their male customers well. But under the white porcelain makeup of the geisha lies a woman in the crossfire of the struggles against patriarchy. This is On the Homefront, a sub-series of World War II in real time. I'm Anna Deinhard. Initially, the geisha are well-trained artists in dancing and singing to entertain at parties of well-off men. They emerged from the 1629 ban on female public performance when women were driven to private performances venues, often situated in pleasure quarters. Soon, they became keepers of Japanese tradition, known for their charm and manners. To be trained as a geisha meant social prestige and education some families usually couldn't afford. In their cultural and artistic training, learning how to perform tea ceremonies is central, something they train at the Urasenki School of Tea. Fulfilling many Japanese ideals of feminine beauty added to her popularity and made her a public figure. When magazines become a thing in the 19th century, many publications deal with the geisha world, its members, and the newest fashion. But after the First World War, a fresh Western breeze sweeps through the Japanese society for a short while, which affects all women's lives, including the geisha. In Tokyo, a short-lived trend occurs. The geisha lose their traditional kimonos and starts dressing in a Western fashion. But the Cooperative Association of the Geisha has just become a national organization. They find this new trend incompatible with the geisha image, and its guidelines quickly bring the geishas back down to earth. To be a geisha, it now becomes obligatory to wear traditional Japanese clothing and dedicate themselves to the traditional arts. This causes many women to give back their license and try their success as barmaids or jazz singers. The new Japanese woman is a product of the struggle against a repressive state, but does not have a real impact on women's position in Japanese society. The Taisho era of the 20s gives men universal voting rights, but women's vote does not follow. The rising self-awareness of women is seen as a threat to male sexual entitlement. Japanese tradition not only gives men the right to intercourse with one's wife, prostitution is an equally important right. The marriage bed is only meant to produce heirs, while fun is reserved for brothels and comparable venues. With a long tradition in Japan, brothels are legalized in federal legislation in 1900. But they are a thorn in the sides of the women's movement, which pursues restrictions on arranged marriages, alcohol, concubine possessions, and prostitution. Their struggle for autonomy forms the image of a new Japanese woman, who is freedom-loving and self-determined in her sexuality. Nevertheless, in the Taisho years, the prostitution sector expands even more as the male demand for paid sex escalates further. Now, there's a wide variety of venues to buy sex, like the Ginza-type cafes, where the waitresses sell kisses and intermingle with a customer in a sexual way for money. Here, the self-determined working woman becomes a sexual object even more desirable for men to possess. Now, a first-class geisha is not a regular prostitute because she won't just sleep with anyone who pays. That said, part of a geisha's training is the deflowering, which men pay high sums for. Sayo Mizuda describes how her first time is sold to 4 different men, one after the other. The mother would teach me all the virgin-like gestures I was to make. I just kept quiet and bent to her will. But once a girl has made her debut, the geisha house mother and the geisha registry office fixes her up with a patron, a dana. But many venues now shift their focus to the customer's sexual needs. The geishas in spas and recreation spots are especially famous for only having minor artistic skills and mostly selling sex. In 1927, the poet Hagiwara Sakutaru writes about increasing prostitution at geishas venues. If I hear someone say he's going off to see a geisha, that can only mean one thing nowadays. Geishas are not companions of the mind, they are companions of the body. It's too bad if geishas are called high-class prostitutes, but that in fact is what they have become. New geisha trainees are now partly recruited through illegal brokers. They lure girls, mostly from the countryside, into the venues by disguising as rickshaw drivers or by promising them factory work. They are then manipulated into taking on a debt to buy kimonos or send money back to their parents, a debt that now ties the woman to the venue and obliges them to work off the sum. In 1927, 80,086 women are prostituted in geisha venues, 12% of which are between 14 and 17. To get to these underage girls, the brokers and geisha venues use adoption contracts. They pay the girls' parents money and promise years of artistic and cultural training for their daughters. In 1929, the global depression hits Japan, and in 1934, a mass crop failure strikes Japan's northern prefectures. Poverty among countryside families increases enormously. This makes women and girls even more vulnerable to traffickers and brokers, who offer loans in exchange for enslaving daughters and female relatives. The Great Depression also puts a damper on social progress, even though the female suffrage movement struggles on for a short while. The fight for the vote peaks in 1931 when the government sponsors a bill to give women full suffrage. It passes the lower house of parliament but is defeated in the House of Peers. The country is now caught in a spiral of increasing radical political tendencies. Military powers gain more and more influence and shape the Japanese emperor's decisions through advisors. The annexation of Manchuria in 1931 and the invasion of China in 1937 means that the country is at war. Married women are now expected to do their part by providing for the old, young and ill, and to keep the house while the men are away at war. The geisha also struggle for social survival. The publicity is shrunk to a minimum and they are rarely invited as acts at official state events. The war effort soon demands that more and more unmarried women go to the factories. Opportunities for vocational training for women increase, and soon parents only rarely give the daughters away to become traditional geisha, causing many venues to close in the 30s. When the Pacific War starts with Japan attacking Pearl Harbor, women in general are called to action. Irie Hisae, who lost her husband on the China front, describes in her diary what is expected of her. Weeping was unforgivable for the wives of Japan. The only time I could cry without reproach was when I was in bed with my child. As the war drags on, younger and younger girls are drafted into the labor force for military-industrial production. Even schoolgirls younger than 13 years old will find death in the most dangerous forms of war labor. Geisha are not spared from joining the labor force. As with most men away at the front, many venues have to shut down. But some geisha manage to cater to the remaining, richer customers right until the last years of the war. Even though tea houses, geisha houses and bars are ordered to close, up to 9,000 geisha will still entertain in 1944. The author Tokuda Shusei describes the reasons for this in his 1941 novel, A World in Miniature. With the reassertion of truly Japanese tastes, the geisha venues had regained their former prosperity, benefiting greatly from a booming war economy, and from the busy socializing of the upper classes, who favored establishments with their banquets and parties. Many women from geisha venues are also trafficked into the Japanese comfort stations for soldiers on the front. Often they are persuaded by the promise of being relieved from their debt after 1 year of service. Most of them have been prostituted since childhood. The years of sexual abuse have already severely harmed the women who fill the comfort stations during the war. It doesn't get better there. Doctors who examine them list the many injuries: broken bones, bruises, reproductive complications, hepatitis, syphilis, psychological hardships including depression, stress disorders, suicidal thoughts, and self-mutilation. The women's movement in 1920s Japan suffers a strong headwind that is reflected on the high increase of the prostitution sector. In a declining economy, the geisha, once aspiring female artists, the embodiment of the Japanese image of a perfect woman, slide even further into prostitution and dependency. When war comes, the geisha who don't end up in the factories are often compelled to prostitute themselves to the frontline soldiers. The struggle against patriarchy that for a while even raged behind the perfect facade of the geisha is, like so many other human values, lost to the war. To understand more about how crazy complicated the Japanese government was, click right here. The Time Goes Army is what keeps our efforts running. Sign up on Patreon or timeghost.tv. Make sure to subscribe and ring that bell.